All right. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back and thank you for listening in. My name is Alissa Wolfe, and today I have a very special treat for you. Many of you listening in have some doubts about this whole process, about this whole methodology, and some of you are just super skeptical. And believe me, I don't blame you. I don't blame you if you're skeptical. I know that you've tried all of the things and you've tried for so long to find a way to naturally try to get in control of your pain. And nothing has really worked. Nothing has even gone past just being a band-aid solution or just covering up the pain for short term. And so if I were you, I would be really skeptical of anything new, no doubt. And so that is why I believe that it is really important to show you what's actually possible. So for many of you, you've lost hope and you've just been struggling with all of this and may have some of those thoughts where like maybe this is the new normal and you're just trying to learn to live with this, but at the same time are struggling with all of the guilt and the grieving over the loss of who you are and your identity in your life. And so I totally get that you would feel that way. And so part of my job is to inspire hope for what is possible. And so today I have someone very special who is willing to come on here and be vulnerable and share her story and her transformation. So in just a moment, I'm going to be bringing up my client slash former client, Emily, who recently just graduated from my program, the Chronic Pain Breakup Method. And in my program, I'm a big data person. I'm very much into the science and the numbers of things, and I like to track progress for my clients in the program by collecting data at the beginning and the end of the program. And so Emily had some significant improvements, not just in her pain when we were looking at that data, but also across all of these different categories, including things like sleep and brain fog and functional ability and activity tolerance and even anxiety, pain-related fear and anxiety. And so the data, what I love about like my job is also matching the data with the qualitative picture of what's actually going on. And so having that data and also getting to talk to Emily and seeing what her experience has been really cool to see. And so I want to have Emily get to share her story. But before we do that, I want to say to you, what I want to say to you is that Emily's pain was not different or special. Like I'm going to let her share all about her pain in just a little bit, but Emily is not the exception or a special case, In fact, actually, when I first spoke to Emily, I was totally upfront with her and I was like, there's going to be parts of this program because of your pain specifically that actually don't directly apply to you. But we're going to have to work together to completely adapt and modify some of the drills and address your specific pain. But for whatever reason, Emily's a rock star, and that didn't scare her away. She ended up just diving in instead and fully committed to the process. And the result is something truly beautiful and transformational. So um, let me just introduce you briefly to Emily, who lives in Austin, Texas. Emily, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, like who you are and a little bit about your background?
Yeah. I live in Austin or right outside Austin. I'm a mom. I have two young kids, and I also am a nurse practitioner, a palliative care nurse practitioner. I work mostly with people who have a cancer diagnosis. And I actually do a lot of pain management in the sort of like cancer world, which is a little different than this, but still definitely has some like background knowledge about pain and about some of the underlying science around pain. Yeah, I've been, do you want me to launch into like the full story or just my background?
I think that's great. And actually almost want to bring that up a little bit because you have this background in pain management and palliative care. And what was some of your background coming into this? Like you said, you had knowledge of some of the science of pain, but what I'm really curious about, and I didn't get to ask you this before, was what was your background in your pain and knowledge and understanding? How has it changed? But also, how has your practice changed, like as a provider, since
Yeah.
going through all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like my sort of existing knowledge sort of melded two things. One, my own like pain experience, which is very different than the types of patients and people that I work with in my job. But in terms of pain, like, symptom management is one piece of a few things that I do in my role, in my job. But the type of pain that I'm managing is usually, some of it is chronic pain, but it's chronic malignant pain, chronic cancer pain. And so a lot of the tools that we're using, and most of the patients that I'm seeing, are people who have a significantly reduced, lifespan based on their diagnosis. So, a lot of the tools that I'm using are mostly pharmaceutical tools. That's kind of what I've had at my disposal for this type of, for these types of people or individuals. And so, I certainly like have done some background stuff about just like why we have pain and some of the very basics about like, about nerve, how nerve transmission occurs and how we experience pain and things like that. And then in my own experience, I sort of took a different route in my own sort of pain experience, where I did certainly go through like the traditional stuff very early on. And then once the traditional things weren't working, which again was largely like pharmaceutical things and some kind of like manual therapies and things like that, I started going a little bit more of like a, integrative health kind of holistic route. And so I had like kind of my own experience of my personal pain experience, and then on the other side here, kind of the patients that I was treating and the people that I was treating, and it was very different, for sure. And I will say, certainly, even though I've been, treating people for pain for a long time, there was tons of stuff, even on the, early kind of education piece, that either the way that you explained it or sort of the angle that you're coming out from a chronic pain perspective was new to me. And so I think even just that, like the science and the education piece of it really has expanded my understanding of pain and the experience of pain as well, which I think, makes a difference, both obviously in my personal experience, but also in the way that I, talk to my patients, and the way that we and the way that we really kind of like conceptualize pain in general.
Yeah. And I've had I don't know, I think it's because this is a very, like, my approach is very science-based, and I attract a lot of healthcare providers and doctors, physicians, nurses, and all of that. And so it's great to hear that this is something that, even though you're in healthcare and you've had a background in pain management, and it's still, there was still so much to learn for you, and also I think to view pain in a different lens when you're treating your patients too. But anyway, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about your pain experience. And so what was kind of, I know you said you've already had tried the medical side, the pharmaceutical side, and then kind of started going into a little bit more of the holistic things, but what was your pain? How long had it been going on for? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started developing headaches as a kid, as a child. And I think the first time that my mom took me to the doctor was like around second or third grade, because I was just kind of continually complaining of these headaches. And even at that age, like we did all kinds of things. Like I had really long hair at the time, like down past my butt. And someone was like, I think one of the doctors was like, oh, like maybe your hair is too heavy and it's pulling on your, like, maybe it's pulling. And so like we cut my hair, I went to the eye doctor, I got like glasses. We did all these different things trying to figure out like, oh, what is causing these headaches? And so I've had pain and migraine. I ultimately got diagnosed with migraine much later in kind of like my teenage years, although it was brought up when I was younger as like a possibility. But yeah, I've been dealing with pain and headaches pretty much my entire life that I can remember. And there's been some ups and downs, and things have changed, and there have been periods where things have been better and periods where things have been more challenging. But I kind of like hobbled along for a while, really until after I had my second kid. And really right when I was breastfeeding, and right after I kind of weaned him, about 3 months after that, headaches kind of came back full swing. So I had like a really nice little period around being like pregnant and having babies of about 5 years where I was not on medications and I was doing really well. And then that all kind of like came crashing down after that. So yeah, initially I went the traditional route. Was placed on birth control and doing some kind of like hormonal modification. I was using just like traditional pharmaceutical rescue medications for migraine, and a bunch of different preventatives that we tried. And then over time I started doing, going to the chiropractor. I was doing acupuncture. I was doing, Chinese herbs. I was doing dry needling. I had tried everything. I looked at light therapy. I was doing like sauna stuff. I mean, everything. I really I was, I think I've always been a person that, like, if there's something I can do for myself to help myself, I want to. And so I was like very much in that zone of like, what can I do? What do I have control over? What do I not have control over? What have I tried? What have I not tried? Allergy testing was a big thing, and diet modification, treatment for leaky gut. I mean, everything. um, and so yeah, and I think that in combination with, again, sort of like my work and my background from that side of things, like I had come to this conclusion that I also spent a lot of time doing like talk therapy and looking for past trauma and like digging up stuff with that and like looking at sort of how do I relate to the world and like all of these different things. But yeah, at some point I sort of realized that, like, again, putting together kind of my background knowledge and my experience and just the whole journey, like that there was a nervous system, that this was a nervous system thing. I really did believe that, but I couldn't find anybody. I'd be Googling, I'd be looking up like scholarly articles. I'm like looking up journal articles, trying to like synthesize all this information and trying to figure out, like, is there a way, if I think this is a component of what I'm experiencing, how do I target it? And I just couldn't find much other. Yeah, there's some articles and things, but like putting it all together in a way that was meaningful and practical and like something very concrete is a different story. So yeah, when I found you, like that was the thing that spoke to me when I heard like talking about nervous system stuff. I can't remember exactly what it was. Like, it was something on social media, and I never click on stuff like that. I really don't. I never do. But it was like this idea had been turning around in my mind, and I had been like searching things off and on. And then this ad came up, and I was like, all right, I'll check it out, even though I never do stuff like that. And even at the last minute before I think I joined like a free call or, hour long thing or something that you had offered. And even right before that, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do it. I don't, whatever, but I did. And I liked what I heard. And so then, yeah, we had a call, and, here we are. But yeah, it was really that sort of like piece talking about the nervous system that like really lit up for me. And that's what I had been searching for and not been able to find anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if you're comfortable like digging in a little bit more, but what about the nervous system? Like, what about your pain made you think that there is a nervous system element here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a few things. One was just this like trend that I saw, which is very common in migraine and probably maybe in chronic pain too. I mean, I'm sure it is, but it's like, it seemed like my world was getting smaller. Like the triggers that were there, and like the things that I knew would like be more likely to lead to a headache or to pain were there. But it took less and less of these things over time to to kick off a headache. So it was like before, maybe if I like didn't sleep really well and I had a really tough night and I was up with kids or something, and I might be more likely to have a headache because I slept really poorly. But then it was like, oh, if I just had like an okay night of sleep, it seemed like I was also more likely to have a headache. So it was like all these things, like I could see that my body was becoming sensitized to these triggers and these like things, and I could see it happening. And it was like, it felt like you're like barreling down towards this like endless dark tunnel of like things will continue to get worse and there's nothing you can do about it. But I also think, like, just as a human and as some of, doing some of the like therapy and other things that I did before arriving here, I just had a lot of awareness in general that like I am somewhat of a sensitive person in terms of like, external stimulation and all kinds of things. And like, again, like my kids, like noise levels and things, like I just felt like I was seeing these like patterns in other places of my life too. But a big thing, I think it really started off when I was treating one of my patients for an opioid induced hyperalgesia. So from the medications they were taking over time, they sort of developed more pain instead of less pain. And so as when I was like treating that and kind of in that world, that I started thinking about myself also and sort of my own experience, and kind of, again, it's obviously two very different processes and things going on, but there was a relationship in a way in my head about what was happening and about the nervous system. And so, yeah, I think it was really kind of a combination of things, but for me, like, it just felt like it was taking less and less over time for me to like develop these symptoms and to develop headaches. And that scared me. And it's like, well, where does it end and where does it go? And I felt like my life was kind of getting smaller. And I saw that happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that a lot of people can kind of relate to that, where you're noticing this like snowballing, everything is getting more and more sensitive, and it's like, if I don't do something different, it's gonna, I don't know, I don't want to know what's gonna happen, but like what will be my life if it's already this way now? How much more can it get worse? And um, so something had to change. So what I, at the very beginning of this, I mentioned, like, I said to you, there's going to be parts that won't fit for migraine. So can you tell a little bit about your experience with what was actually in the program, what you had to do, like what did you get to learn, how has the learning impacted you? Yeah, what was like your general experience, so that people can kind of understand from someone who's actually been in pain, rather than me just telling people all the time.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, the education, certainly, like there were some things obviously in the education that I knew, a lot of things, but there were a lot of things I didn't know. And I felt like that education part is so key, because it sort of informs everything that comes later in terms of like the different exercises and activities. Um, and it helps just like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's even, I don't remember if you mentioned this in your program, but there's like research showing that just the education piece, right, can actually improve people's pain, just understanding like what is happening and why it's happening. But it also helps you kind of like modulate things in certain ways. Like, when it came to time to talk about pacing, for example, pacing activities, like that makes a lot of sense when have just read and understood about like why your nervous system does certain things and how it adapts over time, and neuroplasticity, and like how our bodies change and adapt over time and why that happens. um and I think also education just on a very like basic level, right, it makes people feel less crazy, right? I mean, it's like, okay, there is a reason why you are experiencing X, Y, and Z. This is why. And it's actually like supposed to be an adaptive mechanism of our like very smart, bodies, and the way that we have kind of evolved over time. But it also shows you again, like, okay, well, if we got into this mess because of our nervous system, like we can get out of this mess because of our nervous, using our nervous system. We just have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So that education piece was huge. And it also helps, like, again, like there's a talking to family or talking to friends or anybody about like what you're going through. I think a lot of us, I don't know, but me definitely, like, I don't talk about when I have headaches. I mean, if somebody asks me or like says what's wrong or what's going on, like certainly I'll talk about it, but like I don't walk around advertising it, especially when 15 days out of 30 in a month you're having a headache. Like, you don't just walk around talking about it all the time, because you don't want it to dominate your life and your relationships and whatever. And so a lot of ways it also gave me like language and ways to talk about what I was doing with my husband and with, people in my life, in ways that were really easy to understand and made a lot of sense. So I think the education piece was huge. I mean, the meat of it for me was, the actual sort of like exercises and concepts and things like that, the actual things that you do. But I think the education piece has to be there first. And there's actually, I mean, even just reading about those things informs like the way that you carry out the sort of rest of the program in a way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the pacing was huge for me, even though it's such a basic concept, right? But it's
Yeah.
like, but it's basic, but it's not always easy.
Mhm.
um and I've even found ways of like applying that in other places of my life outside of pain too. It's like it's something that I think makes a lot of sense. And just recently was telling my husband about that too, related to like his jujitsu injuries and things like that. Um so yeah, I mean, that was like the the first kind of concept or whatever that we got to after a lot of the education. And um but really those actual just like practices, activities, exercises, that's what I came wanting to learn. That's
Mhm.
what what can I do?
Yeah.
And that's such a, I mean, we all want to do something, right? Like when you're in pain or something, tell me you want to do something, like what can I do? And it felt like, okay, I have something I can do.
Yeah. I want to bring up the education piece because you mentioned that there are lots of research studies that they they used to call it therapeutic pain education, TNE, but now they call it pain neuroscience education, PNE. So if anyone is ever interested in looking up research articles, PNE or TNE might be what you want to be searching for, but there's a lot of really great studies on it, and it becomes even more robust in its effectiveness when it's combined with other things. So if you just do the education, that can have an impact, like on your pain levels, on your fear, on your range of motion, on your functional ability. That's been well studied, but also when it's combined with other modalities, whether that's exercise or movement or, something that, something more physical, it becomes even more effective. And so definitely, and one of the studies looked at, you probably know what number needed to treat means, but for those listening who don't know what number needed to treat means, it's a statistical number that's used in research where the number needed to treat is how many patients you need to treat in order to have one successful outcome by using a certain treatment, medication, modality, whatever. And so the number needed to treat for gabapentin, a lot of people have heard of gabapentin. Gabapentin, the number needed to treat is 6. So you need to treat 6 individuals for one of those people to have a significant improvement in their pain. But the number needed to treat for pain neuroscience education is 2, which is amazing. A drug, a pharmaceutical that is designed to help people with quote unquote nerve pain, is number needed to treat is less than, or is more than, sorry, the number needed to treat for something that has absolutely no side effects and can really do I feel like it can do no harm. I feel like it's just knowledge. So knowledge, I mean, it doesn't hurt to ever have more knowledge. So yes, there's lots of research for that by itself. And I see so many people improving in the program just from the learning stages, which is fantastic. But yes, everybody wants to know, what can I do? And it feels, I think we mentioned at the beginning too, a little bit about the anxiety piece, but like when you have a toolkit, like your toolbox is filled up and you know how to use those tools and when to use them, you're going to have less fear of like, what can I do? How long is this going to last? I have no control over it. You really do have something else that you can turn to, giving you more control back.
Yep.
So with that being said, what has been your experience now, like with the whole transformation? How are things different? How have you improved? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously like my pain has improved, so that's been great. So I would say, number of days that I have a headache has decreased significantly. The intensity when I do get them has decreased. Their responsiveness to like medications or other interventions has improved. So all of those, but I think almost or equally at least meaningful for me has been that piece around the kind of like the anxiety. Like I've never thought of myself as an anxious person. I've never like identified that way, and even when in pain, but like, as I've kind of gone through things and sort of really broken that down and analyzed it, probably in some of those early calls with you even, I really did understand that like I was having a big anxiety response and fear response around pain, and I didn't even really realize it. And I think having that, again, as you mentioned, like having tools, having some kind of feeling like you have some element of control over what's happening or the situation, and just not so much fear, like when pain does arrive, not so much, again, fear. I wouldn't have identified it as fear. Like I'm not sitting there feeling like, oh, I'm so scared, right? But it's a physical thing that's happening in my body. And it's like when I realize like, well, what is it about? It's like, is something going to get worse? Can I tolerate it this time? Is something bad happening this time? Like, and again, this is like something that I experience all the time, or I was experiencing all the time. And so it was like, but I didn't identify it as fear at the time. But anyway, all that kind of like, not all of it, but so much of that kind of like stuff around pain or potential for pain or impact on my life because of pain has gotten so much better. And that's been as much of a kind of like blessing as of a decrease in pain,
Yeah. So the identifying that was an element, and I like to, when you think about how the neuroscience of pain works and how all of those thoughts, the fears that, oh, will this get worse? Will I have control? Will I be able to survive this one? can feed back into the experience of pain. And so, I see this all the time where the fear and the anxiety kind of, that piece reduces first before we actually see the improvements in pain. And luckily, and I don't know if that's the right word, luckily, but for you, we did see that improvement in the symptoms, the intensity, the duration of your migraines, and all of that, which was really cool. When we sat down at the end of the program, we get to look at like, what were the goals that you wrote down in the very beginning, and I asked you like, what would it take for you to be successful at the end of this program? One of them was actually about, I want less pain, and then and having some tools to be able to do something about it. And then the third thing was definitely having less of this fear or this anxiety about not having control over it. And so when we sat down and looked at, that was your goal at the very beginning, and seeing where you're at now, it's like all three, I feel like, have been hit for you.
Yep.
Yeah. So any I don't know, any aha moments that you had from the program in general that you would say, like, was there anything that really stood out to you that you were like, this was really big for me, it really hit home? Or maybe not, I don't know, what was that for you?
I don't know. I mean, I can't think of one specific thing that jumped out at me, but there are certainly like some kind of like tools and things that I tend to like rely on more than maybe others. But I think, again, like I was sort of surprised at how valuable the education part was to me again, because, I was a person who had some understanding about pain on a more scientific level already. But that was, I mean, that was huge. That really did, it sort of set the stage for the rest of it, and it's stuck in my mind. And again, that kind of pacing still, like I said, that's something that I've found myself using in other ways in like my life, even with my kids and all kinds of things. And so I think, I don't know that there was like one aha moment, but I think the whole thing was a collective aha moment, in a way. It was like, I could see how it all worked together. It made a lot of sense. And then, applying it and seeing my own results, in some ways I was like, I knew that it was something with my nervous system, but even just, I don't know, back to the education too, like I think that helps a lot with the stigma around chronic pain too. There is a stigma around chronic pain, a big one. And I think, again, like a lot of people don't like to talk about it because of that, or they're seen as like complainers, or they're thought of it, people will think of them as weak, or things like that. And I think it just helps. I think the education piece really helps with the stigma too. Understanding why this is happening. It's not your fault, right? Why is this happening? It's actually, again, it's like taking it back to like understanding my body's not out to get me. Like this is an adaptive thing. But again, like we have ways that we can modulate that and affect it too. So
Yeah, that's really helpful too. And yes, so many so many people, I think, don't have that appreciation for the education. Of course, everybody wants to come into it and go like, give me the drills, give me the site, like give me the what can I do? And there is so much of that can be valuable without all the drills. And of course, the drills are great and they work great. And but yeah, the science of it is so validating to actually have something where, if you've lived in pain for so long and everyone just tells you, it's your anxiety, you're just not getting enough sleep, or you're getting so many different explanations, and it's all confusing. None of it's connecting, like none of the dots are connecting. It can make you feel like it's all in my head. I must be crazy. I just need to regulate my emotions. And to some extent, there is some truth to that, but it's the getting the science, I think, is for so many people so validating to say, okay, all right, there is something really here. There's something really going on, and I can do something about it, which is like the key. You can make a difference in it.
yeah.
So yeah, so awesome. So yeah, is there anything that you would say to anyone who's listening and thinking, gosh, like I don't think it's for me, like would it be worth it to me to try an approach like this? Like, my pain is different, or my pain's been around for so long, I've already tried so many things and nothing has worked. What would you say to those people at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, even with your sort of, upfront saying like there are some pieces of this program that might not, necessarily apply to what you're targeting. I think, I think it's just, and again, that my pain has been here since I was a child, like for forever. It's been part of my life for forever. That sometimes can make you think like it's not ever going to change. It can't change. But I think I was at a point where, again, like I felt like I had tried everything. I was in another sort of like rough patch for whatever reason. Again, like I couldn't tie it to anything external. Like it wasn't like I had a big stressful thing going on. Like it was just things were bad for a while for no obvious reason. And so I was just at a place where I was like, I'll do anything. Sure. Let's give it a shot. And so I'm glad I did. I think, even being in the program and hearing other people's stories, like I think there are people that I saw who, in my opinion, like have a much more difficult or challenging situation than I have had. And seeing those people improve too, and seeing myself improve. I mean, I would just say, like, if it's something that you're considering and you're able to do, like, I mean, people improve. And so and again, like being able to like rely on science-based stuff and to know like there is something behind this. This isn't like woo woo, like, oh, if you just, try this or believe this or put this cream on or whatever. It's not, this is science-based stuff. And I've seen it work for myself, and I've seen it work for other people who I think have had some really challenging situations too. So yeah, I mean, I would do it again 1,000 times. So
I love it. Yes. That's awesome. So thank you so, so much. This was super helpful. I think, again, getting people to hear real stories of real people who've gone through it and are on the other side and are feeling better. Of course, pain is not gone. It is not completely like pain-free 100% of the time, but if your worst pain days are less and the pain intensity is less and you're having longer stretches of good days and you're able to control the migraines, then that is all worth it. And it doesn't require any more pills or anything like you said, weird or woo-woo. Always worth it. So if anyone is listening and has any questions, would it be okay to share some contact information for them to reach out to you?
yep. Okay. Yeah. So my email address is probably the easiest thing. And that the best address is Taurus, Taurus, like the star sign, like the car. EEB, so it's like echo, boy, Taurus EEB at yahoo.com. And yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has for me.
Yeah, well, thank you so, so much. And I really appreciate you for sharing. And it's been a pleasure working with you and getting to see your transformation. So thank you for showing up and being committed and trusting the process, even though I like almost scared you at the beginning. But yeah, so thank you. And that's all. Until next
Cool.
time.